Hello, everybody. Welcome to ReadySetCyber, an ongoing deep dive into the issues and solutions in cybersecurity. I'm Elizabeth Perry, Creative Director at TraitWare, and your host for today's show. Today, we're going to tackle one of the most urgent and controversial questions in technology. In fact, nobody is not talking about it. AI. Have we gone too far? Artificial intelligence is transforming the way we work, communicate, and even think. But as AI systems become more powerful and pervasive, concerns are mounting about privacy, security, ethics, job displacement, a whole host of things. As AI becomes central to cybersecurity, both as a shield and a weapon, are we moving too fast? Joined by a panel of experts, we'll take a hard look at the three R's of AI: risks, rewards, and responsibilities. Audience, we know you have choices. We know you have places to be. So thank you so much for spending some time with us today. As always, we want to hear from you. So if you're joining us live, please type your questions or comments into the chat and we'll address them in real time. If you're watching the recording, please reach out via the comments section and we'll be sure to get back to you. We have an awesome group of experts with us today to help navigate the complex issues around AI. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First up, Heath Spencer, coming to us from Reno, Nevada, or California, depending on the day. He's CEO of TraitWare and a leader in phishing-resistant, passwordless multi-factor authentication and single sign-on for the enterprise. Lou Covey, joining us from Redwood City, California, is a veteran journalist and chief editor at Cyber Protection Magazine and a self-proclaimed amateur epistemologist, which interesting. We're going to, figure out what that is a little bit later. Next up, Gam Diaz, based in Madrid, Spain, is a data and product strategist with deep experience in enterprise AI. In fact, he's an author of the Data Mindset Playbook and just out of the shelves now, Agents Unleashed, the art and science of AI-driven Salesforce automation. Last but not least, joining us from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, is technology law specialist, founder of Bradley Gross Law, and adjunct professor of law for corporate cybersecurity practices. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us, Liz.
Yeah, all right. Let's jump in. I mean, I know we have a lot to cover, so let's see what we can do here. So first, let's kind of set the stage here. Heat. People are talking about AI, the double-edged sword. I mean, in cybersecurity, how has AI changed the way we approach cybersecurity, both for defenders and attackers?
Well, like anything, throughout history, tools can be used for good or for bad. When a rock first became a hammer, it could be used to build something or it could be used to hurt somebody. And, AI, which is really buzzword bingo today, mostly machine learning, can be used for good or can be used for bad. And it is moving in a rapid space. And I think there are ways to have the tool assist you in preparing for what's next, but it's also enabling the threat actors to scale at a rate never seen before. And I think that there is some concerns around, how are these systems being deployed, accepted, who's using it, and why.
Yeah. So, TraitWare, right? Is there any AI component?
So we use aspects of AI, machine learning, to accelerate running a lot of math, right? To then derive, can we deliver a higher assurance level that it is Elizabeth signing into something or Brad signing into something? And so in our process, we do use aspects of machine learning and in, the processes of that, which is termed AI today, to help evaluate statistics and math of probabilities that it really is you.
Right. So yeah, there's like like we were saying, the double-edged sword. So you got to be careful on both ends. So next, Lou Covey, from your reporting, what is or are the most surprising ways AI is being used in cybercrime or defense?
Well, actually, that's interesting you asked that because I was talking to somebody yesterday about this, a victim. Um, and what is surprising is the tacit collaboration between cyber criminals and companies like Google, X, and Meta to extract money from business people. In this particular case, it was a CEO of an MSSP in the UK who advertises extensively on Google. She said she spends thousands of dollars every month on Google advertising.
Hmm.
And what she puts out is a free analysis. And lots of people sign up for this stuff. Most of them are scammers. And what they're trying to do is fish their way into her customer database. But every time one of them clicks on that link, she pays money to Google.
Right.
Google gets the money. And she says, well, they've got this process to get a refund on uh, fraudulent responses. And they're all AI bots that are doing this. But it takes Google 6 months to go through that process to get our money back. And then 6 months, they're earning interest on that money. So those companies have a vested financial interest in the success of cybercrime.
Wow. Yeah, that's something. So GAM, on along those lines, are organizations prepared for the sophistication of AI powered threats, or are we just playing catch up?
I'll pick up on Heath's fire analogy, also his rock analogy. Um, as you kind of told me about this podcast, I was thinking about a council of cavemen sitting around thinking, like cavemen leaders thinking about fire. It's like, is it too late? No, but it's already out there. But it's doing so much good. No, but it'll burn people. It'll cut down forests. I mean, it's spreading like wildfire. And yet it's already spread. We forget that we've been using AI in our daily lives. When we use Google Maps, when we get a movie recommendation from Netflix, it's all there, and it comes with all of the risks of bias and lack of explainability and all the risks that we know well now. But agentic AI in particular creates vulnerabilities that we've never seen before. When we talk of agents, a lot of at the beginning we think in human scale. How many friends do we have? We deal with tens or hundreds. But when we create agents, we create them by the millions and billions. And these agents are autonomously selecting, chaining, and orchestrating multiple tools and APIs in unexpected combinations. And these combinations might show emergent behaviors that we never expected and we could never test for. And so this creates a whole new set of vulnerabilities. And the thing that Lou said, if we start designing our websites for agents, now 50% of traffic to e-commerce sites is bots.
Mm-hmm.
My prediction is that probably 90% of traffic to agent traffic is going to be bots. A good proportion will be malicious. Some of them will be crawlers. Maybe if you're really lucky, 1% of these agents will represent real live humans. So it's an interesting time. It's a really interesting time for security. And AI systems, when they start to operate and go deeper in, they start to form their own operational priorities. Those things, whether is it a genuine hack, or is it the bots just running uncontrolled and wild? So we've even got to discern what's a security breach from the outside and what's a bot just malfunctioning.
So really, you're saying we're not ready.
We're not
We're
ready.
not. We're not ready.
We're not
No,
ready. I think
no,
everybody
we're not.
agrees we're not ready. And so Gam, I'd love to have you maybe go deeper on this thought is as the agents get deployed, how do you see, and this probably will go to Brad as well, how do you see that? Because the agent, now that's then self-operating, saying, oh, I need to integrate over here or whatever else, we're already seeing supply chain risk as one of the number one risks to big business. I don't hear anyone talking about how the AI agents are now part of your supply chain risk, and how are you authenticating or determining what's allowed or not allowed in that supply chain, and what it's able to do, right? Because if it's running in the background and tying itself into other things, I view that as, third party supply chain that then adds its own, like, think of it in just a regular vendor space. You hire this HVAC contractor, which is how Target got breached, right? But that HVAC contractor also has its own supply chain, which actually is part of your risk by hiring that HVAC contractor. If we start implementing AI agents and they start contracting other AI agents, as you just mentioned, like, you're absorbing the risk of the one AI agent by it then leveraging other supply chain. And that's what I see really could be explosive risk within the supply chain metrics. And so I'd love to hear Brad and Gam's thoughts on that.
Yeah, me too.
Should I jump in?
Brad, why don't you jump in?
Sure,
Yeah.
I'll jump in. I think that what you're talking about now touches not just on the supply chain and the logistics and so forth of industry, but it also touches on a real problem that the law has with the advent of AI, or I should say the increased advent of AI, because AI, as Gams pointed out, it's been around for a long time. And that is the issue of accountability as AI becomes more autonomous. Okay, that's what you're talking about. Where is the accountability from a legal perspective as AI becomes more autonomous? The question does become, who's responsible? Is it the person who set the AI into motion? Is it the developer? Is it the AI itself, whatever itself might be? And the law simply hasn't accommodated that type of autonomy versus accountability question yet. To put it in a more a framework that people have heard before and can understand without getting political about things. You could look at the framework that gun manufacturers have, right? Who's responsible? Is it the manufacturer that makes the gun, right, for a specific purpose, or is it the person who takes the gun and uses it illegally? Well, the same type of framework now could be applied to AI. Who's responsible? Is it the person who creates the AI, who develops it to do a particular thing? Is it the person who implements it? Or do you simply say, we didn't have control over it. It went on its own. It's autonomous. That's the legal problem that we face. That's the logistical problem that you're talking about as well. And from a legal perspective, we're totally outpaced. I mean, we haven't even, all right, let me put that. We haven't even addressed privacy and data security laws.
Right.
I mean, we haven't even hit that. And now we're already at AI. So we are so far behind that, it's there's a lot of work to be done.
But Brad, when remember that, I think it was an Uber that ran over a woman on a crossing on a bike in Arizona a few years back, and the Transport Commission split the blame evenly between Uber, the driver, the woman, and the local authority. And so it was clear that they hadn't resolved responsibility and ownership of these problems.
Right.
Are we any further?
No, we're not any further, because we have not. All right, we're not any further. There are reasons why we're not further. First of all, the pace of the technology is exponentially faster than the pace of legislation or responsibility allocation can keep up with. That's first. I think secondly, it has to do with the people that are in charge of making the regulations or the laws to approach that type of issue, right? They are, dare I say, incompetent to do so. So we are not further down the line for reasons dealing with both technology and incompetence.
So Heath, I just want to pick up on something that you painted a picture where agents go out and contract agents, and it is now becoming a network. And one of the phrases I've used is like, what we now need is a network of trust. Because if you think about how the internet works, there's registries and DNS.
Yep.
And when we come to agents, there's no provenance on agents. Anybody can publish an agent. Anybody can publish a model context protocol. So all of this stuff has no provenance. And so I feel what we need is a new provenance layer, which is a whole new sub-industry in itself. So there's a big piece missing right now for me.
Yeah, well, I think that leads to, how do you, trust but verify the actual source of the data, right? And we've already seen, so in Brad's world, in the law world, young attorneys using AI to help move quicker on case law or whatever else. And there's been news reports of AI basically fabricated an entire case, and they got debarred for it, right? Disbarred for it. And
well, they got suspended at the very least. Yes.
Yeah, at the very least, right? I'm sure Brad can speak to this better than I can because I just read the highlights in the news. But to your point, how are we going to think about having some sort of trust model where you can authenticate the actual source of the data that's being used, and or basically rely upon trustworthy resources of that, especially as it starts to self-propagate, which is already happening at a scary rate.
Yeah, so I want to actually go in. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, keep going.
No. I was just going to switch gears a teeny bit. And because Heath, you're talking about, well, let's talk about solutions a little bit. There was a question that came from Rob Miller. What can companies be doing today to protect themselves? There are many unknowns. Are there things that people can do? Concrete action, software, policies that might create a safe cyber posture now? And, Heath, maybe you want to talk about identity a little bit. I don't know.
Well, when it comes to identity, right, there's, in today's prefaces, there's three primary buckets of identity. There's human identity, there's application identity, there's device identity. As AI starts to, expand at a rate that is really moving very quickly now, most of the time you would have to think of AI as application and what identity. And I think, as Gam was mentioning, you're going to have to assign it some measure of identity. And then, what is this provenance layer that's then authenticating the identity of that application before it can be used in whatever context. The other aspect where this is leading is the tools for AI that are enabling the threat actors to strategically, so Lou mentioned phishing attacks.
Yeah.
Well, phishing attacks are going to get extremely sophisticated, targeted spear phishing, all of those things beyond just email or anything else, but it's going to expand to actually your hiring process, where deepfakes are becoming so good for video, voice. How are you going to make sure that it's actually a human that is joining your web call and then speaking or passing a board resolution vote or something like that, right? Or let's say another scenario is you have a high net worth individual that needs to transfer a lot of money to somewhere, say they're donating it to a charity or whatever else it is. How are you, right now, you can have a fairly decent confidence of hey, if I get on a web stream call with them, I'm pretty sure it's Brad based on his gestures, all of those things. But in the near future, it's going to be very questionable that it's actually Brad that's telling me, hey, I, as the banker, I want you to transfer this much money to this account. And how are you going to really drive identity assurance of that it is Brad that's making that request? And that, I think, the tools, whatever web tool you're using to do that, are going to have to implement really strong modern human authentication to those platforms to require the users to do that, and other ways to then identify, throughout the life cycle of the customer, tie multiple points of reference into assuring that it really is Brad making this request.
I have a note. The Federal Trade Commission in 2023 said that 33 million Americans were affected by identity theft. Okay. 3% of that was based on AI. That's it. And when
was this one?
This was reported in 2023. The numbers that are coming out for 2024 are not much higher than that. AI as a threat is a very small threat. There was a spike in AI-based attacks between November and December of 2024, and there was almost a 0 success rate with them.
Yeah.
So I mean,
far.
So far, you're right. So far. But right now, we're the cybersecurity industry is putting enormous effort into preventing that 3% of the attacks and ignoring 97% of them. And
well, what are the biggest? So go ahead. Sorry.
Human beings who know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
It's human error.
Attacking human beings who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
So the human issue is still absolutely massive, and we're not putting much resources into that.
Well, I think your point is a good one, that while we're focusing on AI and thinking about what could be and what will be at some point, I agree with you, Heath, that at some point, where that point is, I don't know, but at some point it will become possible for people to be appearing on a video like this when it's not actually them. But I agree with you, Lou, that right now the biggest threat is not AI necessarily, right? It's not even close. It's social engineering of humans, right? On human mistake and human error. So yeah, I think yours is a good reminder, sobering reminder, that while we're looking at all this, let's not take our eye off the ball for what is really hitting us hard these days.
Well, maybe that's a good segue into, Lou, let's talk about GAM. Actually, I'm going to pick on you first. We're talking about shadow AI, data poisoning.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit and say how, we could maybe guard against that?
Shadow AI is, it's happening everywhere. Employees are using personal accounts on ChatGPT to get work done and just passing stuff back and forth. And so, whatever enterprise security you've had is already breached. It's like super easy. So, one recommendation is, you could lock it down, but that's not going to stop anything. What you could do is you could provide secure enterprise grade systems inside your organization that are safe. Training, obvious, like humans are the weakest link here. As Lou was saying, this is where all the breaches happen. So, the trouble is that if you're an enterprise organization, the technology is moving faster than your security policies can catch up. The LLM companies are pretty much releasing monthly, and so we keep switching. And so I'm waiting for kind of enterprise grade AI that sits behind your firewall, that you can start to use, where you're taking open source models, bringing them inside the organization, and making sure that things don't leak out. And it's not just documents that leak out. If my employees are continually using AI as part of external AI as part of a process, the AI is going to become smart to the process that you're operating, and it learns, and that will leak out. Data poisoning is another interesting issue. If you remember back in the pandemic when the Reddit subreddit Wall Street Bets kind of short squeezed the GameStop stuff. That is data poisoning, albeit without AI. But if an organization is, say, training its customer service agents on Reddit conversations, it's possible for me to inject stuff into those conversations to promote my product and denigrate a competitor's product. So, again, it goes down to, provenance on where you're training your data, where you're training your models. You have to be very careful. So data quality needs to take on another dimension when it comes to AI, because, these models and the outcomes depend on the data you give them. And if you feed them the wrong food, they're going to give you spurious answers.
Can we talk about ethics a little bit, Lou?
Sure.
What are your
Wait, I'm an attorney. We're not allowed to talk about ethics. Move on. Move on.
Come on now.
Yeah, but I'm a journalist. I am.
I'm going to shut off my camera for this part of the conversation. Is that okay? We're all right.
Excellent.
But Brad, you should not be too worried about it, because there are no ethical considerations in the development.
There you go.
I mean,
All right.
that's
It's
the most pressing issue. But that is the source of bias and discrimination and the lack of transparency in the entire industry niche. The most frustrating thing that I've got to deal with when I'm talking to AI people is about the issue of ethics. And when I bring it up, everybody says, yeah, we've got to be ethical. We've got to be ethical. But then when I tell them, okay, what is the source of ethics? Well, the source of ethics is religious belief. I don't care what religion it is. It's at the very core of what we're doing. I'm even writing a book on this. And engineers are highly resistant to including anything about religion in anything they do. But still, as a reference point, it's absolutely crucial, and it's ignored altogether within the development of AI. It's something you say, well, I think it was Altman said in a conference a couple of years ago, that first we want to do is build it, then we want to see how to make it applicable, and then we'll see if we can fix the ethics. So it's an afterthought. That's the problem.
Well, cybersecurity is typically an afterthought also, which is been the problem, right? Most businesses just want to see what can they build fast enough, get it to market, make some money, sell it to somebody else, right? So, and the end consumer, the end user, has been bearing the cost of that model for a long time, and I'm worried that this acceleration or proliferation of the machine learning / AI is only going to do that at a magnitude that we haven't seen yet for how bad it's going to be for the end user.
Yeah, but the problem is that human beings will always show you how to do it the worst way possible. I was in a conference a couple of years ago. It was a semiconductor conference, had nothing to do with cybersecurity, but one of the keynotes was about security flaws in the semiconductor supply chain. And I was listening to this guy talk, and I said, well, yeah, I know that. What's the big deal? But I looked around the audience, and there's 1,000 engineers in there, and they are furiously scribbling notes on everything he says on every particular point of security holes in the supply chain. And the common comment I could hear, holy shit, they didn't know. They have no idea how bad it is.
Yeah.
Luke, can I add to something you said? I'm so pleased that you brought up religion. One of the things that, if you think about a complex agentic system, an ecosystem of agents talking to agents, they are all going to be optimized to do the business of the companies that sponsor them. And those companies are answerable to their shareholders. And so they will be collectively optimized for profit or money, and there is no counterbalance. And
did you hear Bruce Schneier's keynote at RSAC? He just flat out came and said, okay, you're going to think that these agents are your friends. They are not. They are secret agents, and their job is to separate you from as much of your money as they possibly can. That's what an agent is.
For any of you, can we trust AI to make critical decisions, or is that like a death sentence?
Yep.
What? Yep, what?
Death sentence.
Anybody else?
Well,
We're
I
going
think
to have to.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's sort of a mixed answer, right? Because we don't want to trust AI to make critical decisions. But if you knew some of the people that are making critical decisions in government in your life every day, you'd say, damn, I'll go for the computer, right? I'll give it a better, right? I'll probably have a safer bet with that. So I think that, it's not so much a question of can we trust AI to make decisions, because we're going to have to trust it to make decisions at some point if we haven't already. I think that the question is, what kind of guideposts are we putting around it and is there a human interaction before the decision is finalized to make sure that from a categorical perspective, the decision is low risk, moderate risk, and isn't something that is so high risk that if there was, as we talked about earlier, AI hallucination and so on, that wouldn't screw things up. So I don't have a problem necessarily trusting AI's decision. I'd prefer a human interaction first. But again, I'm a bit of a realist, look around at the people, again, not getting political, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on. Look at the people, who are making decisions.
Well,
do you trust them?
I think there's other aspects to it as well. And Gam alluded to this in that. So if you go back through just the history of time, tribal days, all of these things, there's a lot of data points around. Communities did really well when they were like below 100 people, and you could just work things out. And the critical decisions were made in this very small. What's critical for those 100 people is not necessarily going to be critical for the adjacent 100 people. And in this era of technology boom that we've had, really since the ability to communicate globally in milliseconds has moved us from localized critical decision making to global critical decision making. And I have concerns that, so if you're using a mixture, Brad, as you said, of people and AI in a smaller pool, or what Gam alluded to is enterprise grade AI that's just in your network and not outside of that, and it's trying to make a decision within the business context, I think that might be better served than something that's trying to make critical decisions at a global scale. Is that point? And I think that that's true for humans and for the systems. I think smaller sets of data that are very relevant to each other versus trying to think of like what's going to be the best for all of the globe. You can't appease everybody. That's going to be very difficult. And so I think there's aspects of that. I also think that there is, back to this point of no accountability, as you mentioned, Brad, or Gam's points to these agents are going to optimize specifically on how to return an investment to the shareholders. Period. That's it. There's no measure of is it just a moral standard? And if the moral standard isn't based on, as Lou mentioned, religion, then or accountability to something outside of ourselves, then what is the truth of that? Well, that could be an opinion. What's true for me is maybe not true for you. And if we're back to just only the strong survive, because that's how the AI agent is going to think, that's kind of nerve-wracking.
I have a note.
Go for it.
Because I like the point that Heath is making about the profit model. And right now there is this concept that we can, even Elon Musk says, in a few years, no one will have a job. Okay, it'll all be done by AI. Well, there have been several studies done that I've looked up, and I averaged it all together. And what I found was that when AI is used as a collaborative tool, it is highly effective and highly profitable. Um, uh, if you have, say you have a minimal staff, okay, and you add an AI primary approach to it, the average likelihood of a breach that's going to happen every year is between 25 and 35%. If you are fully staffed with an AI collaborative, you have a likelihood breach of 15 to 20%. And the costs are about half what it would be if you were using AI completely, just eliminating people altogether. So that's the thing about AI when we take a look at it. Too many of us are looking at it as a competitive solution to reduce headcount. Whereas what it is more of a collaborative tool to make us more efficient in what we do. So it doesn't eliminate human beings.
I agree. I agree 100% with that. And as I started the conversation out, it's a tool. And if it's used properly by a human, it can accelerate the human's capability. Absolutely. I think for the next decade, maybe 2 decades, humans aren't going away. I think the ones that figure out how to use it alongside of them it's like picking up a power tool if you're working construction. Instead of just swinging a hammer, you now have a pneumatic air gun, and you can shoot nails way more efficiently than you could by swinging a hammer and go 10 times faster. It's the same thing. If you learn to use the tool properly to do the job that you've been assigned and help you move quicker, you're going to outpace everybody else. I don't think the humans are going away right away. I think the balancing act is, how do you help the humans use the tool safely and properly?
Yeah. I mean, I use AI. I use AI today the same way I used Google 25 years ago. I use it for research.
Right.
But the thing is, just like 25 years ago, I had to check that Google search results were accurate.
Correct.
And so when I use, and Google has become, search in itself has become a completely useless tool because you can't get past the ads.
Nope.
The monetization of search has destroyed it. And it's about to happen with AI. I mean, Google is talking about putting in purchase agents who will buy stuff for you without your permission. How stupid!
Wow, that sounds like my kids. Are you sure that we're talking about AI?
My children.
We're still talking about AI. All right.
Brad, I want to get into a little bit about like what is being done. To like everybody's talking about how, well, if we do this right, if we do that right, what is there laws? Are there laws around this stuff? And if not, should there be laws around this?
Yeah, there ought to be a law, right? Well, the answer is no. Okay, are there laws? The general answer is no. Now let's get more specific. I think that the only real law that we could say has had any sort of progress or made inroads into this area is probably the EU law, right? The artificial intelligence law that EU put out there, and that took a very pragmatic approach, right? That was not a law that said, well, we're going to outlaw this kind of technology. It doesn't say, we're going to outlaw how people, what people are doing with the technology. It's not like that. Instead, it takes a more risk-based approach, and it divides the level of risk from, I think, at a highest level of unacceptable. You cannot do it, all the way down to minimal or no impact, and that they just basically say use some voluntary code of conduct to act accordingly. And so within those categories, you have unacceptable, you cannot do this, you cannot use AI for this purpose, right? Then you have the high risk, you should follow certain protocols, make sure certain factors are in place, limiting factors, before you use AI, right? Then you have the moderate level, which just requires some sort of transparency level. And then, like I said, low is nothing. So just voluntary code of conduct, which means nothing. Fine. That type of approach so far is the most robust and comprehensive legal approach that I have seen. Now, if you're going to say, well, how about the US? Do we have that? Well, no, we don't. Yes, there are states that are trying to pass certain legislation, certain laws. Federal government has always tossed around the idea of some bills, nothing of particular consequence. In fact, I would say the most pertinent one right now is probably out of Colorado. And that really relates to making sure that AI doesn't discriminate in its use or in its effect to people based on race, gender, creed, sex, religion, that type of thing. So it's trying to set up almost a fairness standard. But, can we say that that's really some hard-hitting law that will impact the way AI is implemented into society and decision-making processes, both at the highest critical level and no. Maybe EU is aiming toward that, but we don't have anything similar to that in the US right now.
So, Brad, what do you think? What do you? Well, to that point, Brad, what do you think about the law that's running through Congress right now that will negate all of the privacy and AI laws that have been passed by the states?
I don't think anything is going to pass muster right now in the Congress. I don't think anything is going to go further than committee. Okay. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One, here in the US, we have incredible lobbyists that have such power. Whatever you've heard about it, I know lobbyists. I used to work with lobbyists, and the power that they have is immense. So I don't think that anything that's necessarily going to go against the tech industry right now is going to pass muster. I also think, and I sort of hinted at this earlier, that the people who are in the position of power that are going to make these laws, they are absolutely ignorant as to the technologies, the risks, the implementation of it. You have people who literally don't even know how to turn on their computer. If Windows gave them an error, they'd have a fit. They wouldn't even know what to do. And these are the people that are now going to listen and think, well, how should we legislate artificial intelligence when it comes to the defense sector with multi-factor authentication and social engineering? This is so far beyond. It's like having a goldfish try to explain bankruptcy law to a goldfish. You can't. There's nothing wrong with the goldfish. It's a perfectly nice pet, but it's just not capable. And I think that until we either appoint people in the government who are capable, or mandate that the people who are in government use sources and rely on sources that know what they're talking about, until then, it's all kind of a mental exercise, and I don't see anything moving forward from a legislative perspective.
Yeah, it's kind of like cybersecurity or privacy, or not necessarily, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so if it's not going to be a law in the near term future, which it's probably not going to be, is there recommendations for businesses just to try to help themselves, right? So you mentioned this whole framework that the EU did, right? So in my mind, that sounds like, okay, as the CEO of a company, I want to take that framework of the EU law and at least maybe try to apply it through corporate policy to our data sets. And how do I position my business to make sure that I'm doing the best I can, in the investment of my shareholders, all of those things, that AI isn't just going to, when the statistics of, and I know Lou mentioned some stats on the likelihood of breaches and all of those things. However, north of 60% of all the way up through medium-sized enterprises do not survive a cyber attack and or breach, disruption, etc. And if I'm looking
Heath, I'm gonna have to stop you there.
Yeah.
I've heard that statistic, and I looked it up, and it came from a guy that studied 10 companies and that went out of business, and 6 of them went out of business because of a cyber breach. But 10 companies out of the thousands don't qualify as a verifiable statistic.
Yeah. Okay.
Hmm.
Fair enough.
Fair enough.
I have other personal experiences where an example that I can share where local real estate brokerage um,
Oh,
got
real
found.
estate. Okay.
Well, so so wire
Real estate
transfer.
is one of the most insecure industries in the world.
Absolutely, right? But this brokerage was found guilty in a court of law for misusing tools, and that led to, seven-figure losses. They didn't survive, right?
Yeah.
And so I have personal experience with knowing businesses that didn't. So
Yeah.
whether it's an article that says 60% or not, I personally know that there's people going out of business because of these
Mhm.
things.
Yeah, they
And
are.
so if you want to protect your investment and try to return a profit to your shareholders, all of those things, can business owners be looking at frameworks like the EU to then, at least from a policy standpoint, and at what point do cyber insurance provider carriers start to say, if you don't have a framework or a policy in place like this for AI in use of your company, then your insurance rate is X or we won't insure you, right?
All right, so we're actually running out of time. We're going wicked long, which is good and bad. But well, good news is you guys are going to come back and we'll do this again because it's ridiculous. There's so much to talk about. Anybody, okay, 30 seconds. Final thoughts. Gam, you're up.
Yeah. Final thoughts. Going back to the beginning question, has it gone too far? Definitely not. We've only just got started. I mean, it has to be made safer. It's got to go further. As we design for the real world, we're going to see the vulnerabilities and we'll fix them. As long as the AI that we are using is under the control of people we trust. And so my final leaving, I want to leave you with a very important question from my friend, Tony Fish, or rather his father. It's like, who is supervising your thinking?
Excellent. Good point. Brad.
So everything Gam said, yes. And I think that if we're going to look, just take a few steps, one or two steps forward to look to the future and say, how is this all going to play out? What you just made a great point. I think it was Heath that just made a great point. Insurance is going to start to define the use of AI and how it's implemented, as well as self-regulated entities. Like for lawyers, they have the Bar Association, doctors have medical boards, financial industry has FINRA. You're going to start seeing in the absence of comprehensive uniform law, you're going to start to see self-regulated entities make the rules for their sectors.
Yep.
Right. That's another really good point. Lou, what's your final thought? Call to action.
This year, $80 billion is supposed to be invested into AI and $20 billion of revenue. That is an unsustainable business model. And right now, AI development, actual development of what can be done, is so far behind the projected image of what AI can do, is it's going to lead us to a crash within the next 2 years. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from several VCs who see it coming. But the fact of the matter is, reality is catching up. And as they say, reality is a bitch.
Yeah.
Is that what they say?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Heath, your final thoughts.
So my final thoughts is I agree with what everybody else has said, and I really like the point of, Gam's point of it, find a source you can trust. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things is as we start to use AI in these guys that are building the LLMs that we want to take advantage of, the different ones, are they self-regulating enough? And then how do we build the trust in them to use their tools until we can have our businesses that could afford even to house their own and build their own models internally at an enterprise grade? And I know, NVIDIA is already working on ways to try to help companies deploy their own systems, et cetera. But I think the biggest questions is what am I using it for today? Is it low risk? Is it medium risk? Is it high risk? And if I'm choosing to use, whatever platform it is. And I don't want to promote any of them, but there's like 3 or 4 that are the top big ones, right? And then there's all these little other agents you can deploy. Choose your own adventure with that. And I think it's going to be reputation and how they handle themselves moving forward. But building trust with those models is going to be key.
All right. This has been a great discussion. You guys, I want to thank you all so very much for joining us. That's all we have time for today. Another hot topic with not enough time to talk. So we'll be back. To our panelists again, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. As a reminder, the show is recorded and will be available on YouTube, ReadySetCyber channel, or on LinkedIn. If you've enjoyed the show, we appreciate the likes and the sharing, and comments are always welcome. We are all available on LinkedIn and happy to chat, so please don't hesitate to reach out and let's keep the conversation going. Have an excellent morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you on the next Ready, Set, Cyber.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.